I never imagined Christmas dinner would end with me sprawled out on the floor. One moment, I was just sitting down to take my place at the table, pulling out a chair like I had every year before. The next, my stepdad's hand slammed down on my shoulder, pushing me with such force that I couldn't catch my breath. His glare was ice cold, and his words cut deeper than I expected. That seat belongs to my real daughter. Get out. The room froze. It was as though time itself was holding its breath. No one said anything. No one moved. I stood up, my body shaking, but I was determined to stay steady. I could taste the sharp, metallic tang of blood on my tongue, and I could feel the heat rising in my chest, not from anger, but from something colder. Something stronger. What he didn't know, though, was that before the night was over, everything was going to change. It wasn't just about that moment. It was about everything he had done up until now, every look, every word meant to diminish me. This wasn't a sudden blow-up. If only it had been. I wish I could tell you that my stepdad snapped, that everyone was caught off guard. But the truth. Families don't fall apart in one swift moment. No. They crack slowly, quietly, long before anyone notices. I've been living with him since I was 13, after my mom married him in a whirlwind romance that she thought would give her a fresh start. For her, it was. For me, it meant learning to make myself as small as possible in the place that was supposed to feel like home. He never raised his voice. He didn't have to. His silence was loud enough. A glance here, a tight smirk there, always timed perfectly to leave a sting. Whenever my mom saw it, she brushed it off. He's trying his best, she'd say. You're too sensitive. You read too much into things. I heard those lines so often that they became the backdrop to my childhood, like the hum of an old heater in my bedroom that I didn't even notice anymore. By the time I hit my 20s, I had mastered the art of shrinking myself. It was easier to disappear than face the tension, easier to keep the peace than confront the chaos that lived beneath it. Holidays were the worst. The house was beautiful, sparkling with holiday decorations like something out of a magazine. But every room felt colder than the snow outside. Emily, his daughter, was always the center of attention. She did nothing wrong. She was simply the one he had chosen to shine a light on. I wasn't. Still, I kept coming back. Not for him. But for my mom. Maybe, just maybe, if I kept trying, if I kept showing up, she'd finally see me, see us, as more than just the version of me that he created. This Christmas was supposed to be different, simple. Dinner. Gifts. Forced smiles. I even rehearsed what I was going to say in the car on the way over, just to avoid giving him any ammunition to twist my words into something he could use against me. But from the moment I walked in, I could feel the tension hanging thick in the air. He barely acknowledged me. My mom handed me a plate without meeting my eyes. And there, at the end of the table, was Emily, already seated in the chair I'd taken every year since middle school. I should have seen it coming. When he shoved me, it wasn't just physical. It was everything. As I stood up, brushing pine needles from my sweater, one thought settled in my mind, as cold and hard as ice. Enough. The silence that followed wasn't protective. It wasn't a calm pause, waiting for someone to step in. No, it was the kind of silence people use when they want to see how much humiliation you can swallow before you make them uncomfortable. My mom gasped, but not the kind of gasp a mother makes when her child is hurt. It was the sharp inhale of someone embarrassed that the moment wasn't staying neatly under the rug, like she wanted it to. She reached for a napkin, as though she could just wipe away the humiliation with a quick swipe. "Ava, sweetie, just sit somewhere else," she whispered, her eyes darting between me and him, as if I were the one to blame for this. Emily didn't even look up. She just pretended to adjust her bracelet, too used to being the one defended. I got to my feet, my palms stinging from the cold hardwood beneath me. My stepdad didn't flinch. He didn't even look surprised. He stood over me, still gripping the chair he'd ripped from me, his voice slicing through the tension. "I said what I said," he repeated, his words deliberate and cutting. "This seat belongs to my real daughter." Real. That word burned more than the fall itself. I straightened my sweater, my voice as even as I could manage. "You could have just asked me to move." He smirked, that cruel, satisfied curl of his lips. "You never listen unless someone makes it clear." And there it was. The truth. He didn't want me to be corrected. He wanted me humiliated. Mom rushed in with a half laugh, trying to fill the space with something that could pass for normal. "Let's not ruin Christmas, Ava. There's a chair by the window." The chair by the window. Far from the table. Far from the conversation. Far from being part of the family. My heart was pounding, my pulse thundering in my ears. For years, I had convinced myself that enduring moments like this, keeping the peace, meant I was keeping the family together. But standing there, looking at my mom, at him, at the quiet complicity of everyone else, I felt something shift in me. Not rage. Not even hurt. Just clarity. I walked to the kitchen instead of the window seat. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my coat, and my mom followed, whispering, "Don't make a scene." I turned to face her, my words tumbling out before I could stop them. "He pushed me in front of you, and you're worried about a scene." She blinked, speechless. Behind her, I could hear him laughing quietly with Emily like nothing had happened. Like I was nothing. That was the moment. The exact second I felt the break. A clean snap inside me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, "You will regret this." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. I wasn't threatening him. I was choosing myself. I drove home that night, hands clenched on the steering wheel, the Christmas lights blurring outside the windshield like smeared watercolor. I wasn't crying, though I thought I would. There was nothing left to cry about. Just a steady, quiet resolve, like my mind had finally stopped negotiating with the pain I had been tolerating for years. My phone buzzed. Once. Twice. Then non-stop. Mom. Mom again. Then Emily. Then Mom. I didn't answer. Let them sit in the silence they had insisted I accept all these years. When I got home, the house was dim, except for the faint glow from the kitchen sink. I hung up my coat and stood there, fingers pressed against the counter, replaying the shove in my mind. My mom's whisper, "Don't make a scene," his voice echoing behind her like the clang of an iron gate slamming shut. Real daughter. The words stuck to me like frost. I boiled water for tea, needing something warm to hold. The steam rose softly, like a ghost, while something else settled in my chest, resolve. He wanted to remind me of my place. He wanted me to shrink down so small I'd disappear. Fine. I would disappear, but not in the way he expected. I opened my laptop, but not to rant. Not to send a message filled with fury. Instead, I pulled up old documents, payments, bills, agreements. Every piece of paper I'd helped organize over the years. He liked to pretend he was the head of the house, but half the things that kept it running had my fingerprints on them. I had never pointed it out before, but now I didn't care. This wasn't about destroying him. It was about holding him accountable. About giving my mom a chance to finally see the truth. The clock hit midnight before I finished reviewing everything. And when I did, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Tomorrow, his world would tilt, not because I broke anything, but because I finally forced him to look in the mirror, and he wouldn't see it coming. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. The next part is where it all unravels. The next morning came early, and the first call came at 6:12 a.m. I didn't answer. I knew it was him. My phone kept buzzing against the kitchen counter, each vibration feeling like a reminder of everything I had just started to untangle. His name flashed across the screen, then my mom's, then his name again, repeating in an endless loop of urgency. But I just sat there. I didn't even check the voicemail. Instead, I poured cereal into a bowl, the morning light streaming through the window and casting soft shadows across the tile floor. It felt like any other morning, but it wasn't. The air around me was different now, lighter somehow, like the weight that had been pressing on my chest for years had started to lift. I wasn't bracing for the next wound, the next cruel comment. I wasn't afraid of what would come next. I was preparing for something different. Something real. The calls kept coming. By the time I finished breakfast, there were 17 missed calls. By the time I tied my shoes to leave the house, that number had climbed to 26. But still, I didn't check a single voicemail. I drove to the small office in the north end of the city, the place I had been to only once before, when I had helped my mom with a minor issue with her insurance. The attorney there remembered me instantly, and when he looked up from his desk, his face softened. "What brings you in today, Ava?" I slid the folder onto his desk, my hands steady despite everything. "I need help making sure my mom understands what she's financially tied to, and what she isn't." He opened the folder, flipping through the papers I had so carefully organized the night before. My mom's name was everywhere. Bills she'd paid. Repairs she'd covered. Things she didn't even know about. My stepdad had been pretending to handle it all, when, in reality, she'd been shouldering the weight of it. There was no legal wrongdoing, nothing dramatic. But there was a pattern. A pattern of financial dependence that had left her vulnerable without her even knowing it. The attorney exhaled slowly. "This is a lot. Does your mom know about this?" "No," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "Because he never let her see the full picture. And she never asked." He nodded, thoughtfully, like he'd seen this before. "And what do you want to do?" "I want her to know the truth. I want her to see what she's been protecting at my expense." He tapped his pen against the folder. "We can request a meeting. Neutral ground. Lay out the information calmly. Nothing confrontational." "Confrontation already happened last night," I said quietly, my gaze focused on the documents. "This is clarity." The attorney nodded again. "You're not trying to destroy him." "No," I said, my voice firm. "Just the version of him she thinks she knows." We scheduled the meeting for that afternoon. When I left the office, the cold air hit my face like a shock, a baptism of sorts. My phone buzzed again. Another number I didn't recognize. I didn't answer. Let it ring out. When the voicemail popped up, I pressed play. It was my mom. Her voice was tight with anxiety. "Ava, please call me. He's upset. He said, you're trying to cause trouble. I don't know what happened last night, but we need to talk." I didn't respond. I deleted the message. Not because I was angry. Not because I hated her. But because I was exhausted. She still didn't understand that what happened last night wasn't a new beginning. It was the culmination of everything. It was a moment I couldn't take back, and one she couldn't ignore anymore. By noon, the missed calls had climbed to 33. I spent the rest of the morning in a small cafe, across from the attorney's office. The winter air was crisp, and the windows of the cafe were covered in frost. I cradled my coffee cup in my hands, watching the ice melt slowly down the glass. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was bracing for the next blow. I was ready to face the truth. At 2 p.m., my mom walked into the attorney's office alone. She looked tired, her scarf crooked, eyes rimmed with red, like she had been crying for hours. She walked toward me cautiously, almost like she was afraid I would disappear if she approached too quickly. "Ava," she whispered, her voice fragile. "Why are we here?" I gestured toward the conference room. "You'll understand in a moment." The attorney spread the documents out across the polished table. My mom stared at them, confusion creeping into her eyes. Then, as she started tracing the dates and amounts, a different look took over. It was fear. Realization. "Why? Why did he put this in my name?" she asked, her fingers trembling. The attorney answered gently. "Legally, he couldn't qualify. Your credit carried these obligations. You've been responsible for most of the household expenses." She blinked rapidly. "But he told me he handled everything." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The attorney continued. "Nothing here is illegal, but it does show a long pattern of financial dependence that has left you vulnerable without you realizing it." Mom leaned back in her chair, her hand covering her mouth in shock. I had no idea. That was the moment, the one I had been waiting for. The moment when everything she had been holding on to, every excuse she'd used to defend him, finally shattered. I saw it in her eyes. The loyalty, the tone she had always used to silence me. It all collided with the truth sitting in front of her. And then, her phone buzzed on the table. She flinched when she saw the screen. 37 missed calls. All from him. She didn't answer. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of the heater. Finally, she looked at me. "When he pushed you, Ava," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I didn't think it was that serious. I thought you two just argued." I shook my head, my voice steady. "He shoved me to the floor, Mom. In front of everyone. And you told me not to make a scene." She winced, like the words themselves cut deep. "I didn't know what to do," she whispered. "He gets angry when I confront him. I thought keeping things calm was better." "Calm for who?" I asked. My voice didn't rise, but it cut through the air, sharp and clear. Her eyes welled with tears. "I never wanted you to feel unwanted." "But I did," I said softly. "For years. And yesterday wasn't the first time. It was just the first time it was undeniable." The attorney excused himself to give us privacy. As soon as the door clicked shut, my mom folded her arms over herself like she was trying to hold herself together. "What happens now?" she whispered. "That's up to you," I said gently. "But whatever you decide, it has to be with full knowledge, not the story he tells you." Another buzz. Her phone lit up again. 41 missed calls. She silenced it without answering. When we walked out of the office together, the winter sun was already sinking low in the sky, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. I thought she would turn back, would go home to him like she always did, held in place by habit and fear. But she didn't. She stood beside me, her breath coming in shallow puffs, staring down at her shoes, like she was collecting pieces of herself that had been lost for years. Then, in the quietest voice, she said, "Ava, I want to go home." Not to him. Just, for tonight. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't revenge. It was something else, something raw. Something that felt like the beginning of accountability. A new chapter. As we walked toward the parking lot, my phone buzzed once more. I looked down. 47 missed calls. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. But I felt relief. Finally, he knew. I wasn't playing by his script anymore. And tomorrow, he'd have to live in a world where I didn't collapse under his voice, his expectations, or his version of family. A world where the truth had a seat at the table, even if he tried to push it away. The next few days passed in a blur, but they were different. There was no constant buzzing of my phone. No text messages from him, no desperate voicemails from my mom pleading for me to come home. He hadn't called once since the meeting at the attorney's office. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the silence didn't feel oppressive. It felt freeing. I spent most of the days in a fog of exhaustion, trying to adjust to the quiet in my own mind. The weight of everything I'd carried for so long, the years of tension, the hurt, the constant need to shrink myself, was still there, but it was different now. Lighter. Less suffocating. I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't forcing myself to be invisible just to make everyone else comfortable. And that felt like a small but significant victory. Mom didn't call me, and I didn't call her either. I knew she needed time. Time to process everything she'd learned. Time to face the reality of everything that had been hidden from her. And I needed time too. I wasn't angry at her. Not anymore. I knew now that she had been trapped in a web of manipulation for years, and that web was a lot harder to escape from than it seemed. But what mattered was that she was starting to see it. For the first time, she was beginning to question everything. Then, on the fourth day after the meeting, she called. I didn't know what to expect when I saw her name flash on my phone screen, but I answered anyway. Ava, her voice was quiet but steady. Can we meet? I felt a pang in my chest. A mixture of relief and uncertainty. Part of me wanted to run, to protect myself from whatever was coming next. But another part of me knew that I couldn't keep avoiding this. Not if I wanted to move forward. Not if I wanted to start rebuilding. We agreed to meet at the same cafe where I'd spent the morning after the meeting with the attorney. I arrived first and sat at a table by the window, trying to calm the knot in my stomach. When she walked in, she looked different. Not in a way that was immediately obvious, but in the subtle way someone does when they've started to reclaim pieces of themselves that were lost for a long time. Her eyes were tired, but there was a strength in them now. A clarity I hadn't seen before. She sat down across from me, her hands wrapped around a warm mug of coffee. I've been reading everything you gave me, she said, her voice quieter than usual. I can't believe how blind I was. I should have known. You weren't blind, Mom, I said softly. You were tired. And he counted on that. She nodded slowly, the weight of those words sinking in. I've been tired for so long, and I let him convince me that I didn't need to know everything. That it was better if I didn't. You didn't deserve that, I said. None of this was your fault. She blinked rapidly, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. Instead, she looked at me with a kind of vulnerability that made my chest tighten. I want things to be different, Ava, she whispered. I want to learn how to stand up for myself, and for you. For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just watched her, trying to process what I was hearing. She had always been the one to make excuses for him, the one to silence me when I spoke up. But now, here she was, admitting everything. A part of me wanted to reach across the table, to tell her it was okay, that she could fix everything. But I knew better. It wasn't about fixing anything. It was about change. Real, lasting change. I know it's not going to be easy, she continued. I've spent so long telling myself that everything was fine. But now I see that I've been making excuses for him, for both of us. And I won't do that anymore. A weight lifted from my shoulders at her words, but I didn't smile. I couldn't. Not yet. But there was something there, something new. Hope. Hope that she was finally seeing the truth, hope that this was the beginning of something better for both of us. I don't know what happens next, she said softly. But I want to figure it out. Together. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was different, like we were both acknowledging something we hadn't been able to before. something that had been buried for years. As we sat there, talking quietly about next steps, about her learning to take control of her life again, about me setting boundaries with my stepdad, about us both moving forward, I realized that this wasn't the end of anything. This was the start of something. Something I didn't have the words for yet, but I could feel it in the way the air between us had shifted. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and I could see a path ahead that wasn't so dark anymore. When we parted ways that afternoon, it wasn't with any grand gestures or promises of everything being perfect. But it felt like the first time in a long time that we had been honest with each other. Really honest. And that was enough for now. As I drove home that evening, my phone buzzed again. Another missed call. Another voicemail. This time, it was from him. His voice was tight, controlled. "Ava, we need to talk. I'm trying to keep things calm here. This isn't the way things are supposed to go. I don't want to escalate this." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I turned up the radio, letting the music fill the silence, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to listen to his voice anymore. I wasn't scared of him anymore. I wasn't afraid of what he might say or do. I had finally found my voice, and I wasn't going to let it be silenced again. The next part will show you just how much one person can change when they decide to take back their life. Keep watching. It's strange how something so simple, like deciding to take control of your own life, can feel so monumental. But as I stood at the kitchen counter that evening, looking out the window at the sunset, I realized that I was no longer the person I used to be. I wasn't hiding, shrinking, or waiting for permission to exist in my own life. I had chosen to stand up for myself, and there was no turning back. The calls continued, relentless as always. The missed calls piled up, 38, 42, 47. His name flashing on my phone screen like it was somehow supposed to matter. But it didn't. Every time his name appeared, my hand didn't tremble. It didn't twitch to pick up the phone and listen to his familiar voice. No, instead, I felt nothing. A cold, steady nothing that had replaced the fear and the anxiety that had once ruled me. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. But I couldn't ignore it either. I couldn't ignore the fact that he wasn't going to stop, not without a fight. So, I had to make sure that when I stood my ground, I did it in a way that didn't just protect me, but also protected my mom from the manipulations I knew were coming. One evening, I finally decided I needed to take the next step. I wasn't going to let him dictate the terms of my life anymore. I wasn't going to let him play the victim. So I went to the lawyer's office again, this time with a purpose. When I arrived, the attorney was waiting for me. His face was calm but expectant, knowing what was about to come. "Ava," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "What's the plan?" "I'm going to confront him. But I need a way to make sure it's done legally. I don't want to leave anything open for him to twist. This time, when he pushes, I need to make sure he can't come back." The attorney nodded. He had seen clients like me before, the ones who had been hurt so many times they didn't know how to fight back, until finally, something inside them snapped. And when that something snapped, there was no going back. "We can arrange a formal meeting. I'll help you get a clear picture of everything that's been done, every little thing he's tried to sweep under the rug," the attorney explained. "We'll make sure that everything he's taken advantage of, every loophole he's used, is exposed." And that's exactly what we did. We set up a meeting at a neutral location, a place where my stepdad couldn't intimidate anyone, a place where the truth would be the loudest thing in the room. My attorney made sure that every single piece of evidence we had, everything I had gathered, every detail about the financial manipulations, every lie, was on the table. The day of the meeting, I dressed simply. Nothing too bold. I didn't need to make a statement with my appearance. The only statement I needed to make was with the truth. When my stepdad walked into the room, his expression was the same as always, cold, calculating. But I could see the flicker of unease behind his eyes when he saw the papers spread across the table. "What's all this?" he demanded, trying to sound in control. "It's everything you've been hiding, all the ways you've manipulated this family and covered it up with lies," I said, my voice steady. "You didn't just break me. You broke my mom too. But we're not afraid of you anymore." His eyes narrowed, and I could tell he was trying to regain his composure, trying to figure out how to turn the situation back in his favor. But it was too late for that. The truth was already out. The lawyer began speaking, explaining the legal implications of everything he'd done, detailing the financial responsibilities that my mom had unknowingly carried for him, the debts he'd placed in her name without her knowledge. My stepdad tried to interrupt, but I could tell that, for the first time, he realized he couldn't control the narrative anymore. At one point, he slammed his hand on the table, his voice rising. "You don't know what you're doing. You're making a huge mistake. This will ruin everything." I wasn't intimidated. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "No. You made a mistake. And now, it's time for you to face the consequences." The room went silent. Even the attorney, who had seen his fair share of confrontations, was still. The tension in the air was thick, but it wasn't the kind that made you want to shrink. It was the kind that made you want to stand taller. And I did. For the first time in years, I felt the full weight of my own power. I wasn't just confronting him for myself. I was doing it for my mom too. I was giving her a chance to finally break free of the illusions she had been living under. I was giving her the truth she had denied for so long. And for the first time, she was choosing to see it. My stepdad didn't have much to say after that. The remainder of the meeting was a blur. I don't even remember all the details. What I do remember is the way I felt when we left the building. My mom, standing beside me for the first time like we were on the same team, like she was finally seeing me as her equal, as someone worthy of her support. It was something I had been waiting for years. As we walked back to the car, my mom turned to me, her voice soft but strong. "I'm sorry, Ava. I should have seen it sooner. I should have done more." I squeezed her hand, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in so long. "You're seeing it now. That's all that matters." When I got home that night, my phone buzzed. Another missed call. Another voicemail from him. But I didn't need to listen to it. I didn't need to hear his voice anymore. I had done what I needed to do. I had fought for myself, for my mom, for everything I had been quietly carrying for so long. And no voicemail, no call, no attempt to manipulate me could change that. It's incredible what can happen when you finally stop allowing others to write your story for you. The next chapter. It's all about moving forward, rebuilding, and taking control of the life you deserve. Stay tuned for more. The weeks that followed were a blur of quiet victories. Life wasn't perfect, and there were moments when I wondered if I'd ever feel completely free from the weight of my past. But every day, I felt stronger. It wasn't the grand, dramatic moments I had imagined for so long, but the small, quiet shifts, the ones no one else could see, that made all the difference. Mom and I started to talk more, not just about the past, but about the future. We began rebuilding our relationship, one conversation at a time. It wasn't easy. There were still moments when she hesitated, unsure of how to navigate this new dynamic between us. But each time she took another step toward me, I could feel the distance between us closing. She'd often call, asking questions about things she had never needed to worry about before. How to handle her finances. How to take control of her own decisions without feeling like she had to ask for permission. It wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about reclaiming her life, her voice. And in a strange way, by helping her find her own power, I was rediscovering mine, too. Then, one evening, she called and asked if we could meet. I knew this wouldn't be a casual catch-up. there was something different in her tone. When we met, I could see it right away. The change in her was subtle, but it was there. The shoulders that had always been hunched in exhaustion now seemed a little straighter. Her eyes weren't as tired, and the soft, unsure voice I'd always known was now firm, confident. "I've been thinking," she began, staring down at the table between us. "About everything. About what happened with him, and what you said. You were right. I've been letting him control me for years. But I'm done. I don't want to live like that anymore. I don't want you to live like that anymore either." I could feel the lump in my throat. This wasn't just an apology. This was something deeper. This was her finally seeing everything I had been trying to show her for so long. And it was hard, I could see that. But she was doing it. She was choosing to change, to stand up for herself, and to stand beside me. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen my mom stand so tall, and it felt like everything had been leading to this moment. "I'm going to change, Ava," she said, looking me in the eye. "Not just for you, but for me. For the first time in years, I'm not going to let him control me. I'm going to start making my own decisions, even if it's hard." And in that moment, I realized something. She wasn't just choosing to stand up for herself. She was choosing to stand beside me, to fight for me, the way I had fought for her. And that made everything worth it. For years, I had longed for her to see me, to see the truth. And now, she was. But the most unexpected part of this whole journey was the realization that I was starting to reclaim something that had been lost for a long time, my sense of belonging. I had always felt like an outsider in my own family, but now, I was finding my place again, not as a shadow, but as someone worthy of love and respect. Someone who could stand tall, even when everything else felt uncertain. One day, I decided to meet with my stepdad. I knew he'd try to manipulate me, to twist everything I had learned to his advantage. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't afraid of him, or his empty threats. I wasn't afraid of being pushed aside or being made to feel small. I had fought too hard to let that happen again. When I walked into the room where we were supposed to meet, I could see the surprise in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to show up, let alone stand my ground. He immediately tried to control the conversation, playing the victim, twisting the truth to suit his needs. But I didn't let him. "You're done controlling me," I said firmly, my voice steady. "You're done manipulating my mom and me. We see you now. We know who you are. And we're not going to let you do this anymore." For a moment, he just stared at me, his face unreadable. But then, his smirk returned, though it was weaker now, like he knew his power over me had slipped away. He didn't know how to respond. Not because he was shocked, but because he didn't have any control anymore. He had nothing left to say. "I don't care what you think you can do anymore," I continued, "but I'm not afraid of you. And you can't break us." I walked away from that conversation feeling lighter than I ever had before. It wasn't about winning or losing, it was about taking my life back. It was about no longer letting him dictate the terms of my existence. I had taken a stand, not just for me, but for my mom, for everything we had been through together. As I walked out of the building that day, I felt the full weight of what I had accomplished. The months of pain, the endless battles with silence, the fear of being unheard, those were all behind me. And I didn't need anyone to validate that. The truth had been set free. And I had finally, completely, reclaimed my life. The journey isn't always easy, but when you choose to take back control, something incredible happens. You start to see the possibilities, what you can rebuild, what you can create, and what you're finally free to leave behind. It's all about the power of choice, and sometimes, that's all you need to change everything. Keep watching, because the best is yet to come. It's strange how once you start reclaiming your life, the pieces start falling into place in ways you never expected. At first, it felt like everything was falling apart: relationships, trust, security. But slowly, over time, I began to see that those things weren't really falling apart. They were just being redefined. Rebuilt. And even though the journey was far from over, I could finally see the path ahead clearly. It wasn't just about confronting my stepdad anymore. It wasn't even about the day-to-day battles of figuring out how to live without the constant weight of fear and self-doubt. It was about healing. Healing from years of emotional neglect, from a life spent trying to survive rather than truly live. And that was the hardest part. Not the fight. Not the confrontation. But the part where I had to forgive myself for allowing things to go on as long as they did. There were days when it still felt like I was carrying a burden. The fear, the anxiety, those things didn't just vanish overnight. But they became less and less as I took the time to heal, to process, to let myself feel the things I had been suppressing for so long. And in the midst of all that, there was this quiet strength that began to grow inside of me, like a seed sprouting in the dark. Mom and I spent hours talking, sometimes about things that had nothing to do with the past. We started to create new memories, simple moments of connection. Watching a movie together. Cooking dinner. Laughing over ridiculous inside jokes that had nothing to do with the past. I could feel the walls that had once been between us slowly crumbling, and I knew that we were healing together. And that was something I hadn't even known I was craving until it started happening. But there were moments when it wasn't just about her and me. It was about how I was learning to be in the world again, how I was finding new friendships, new connections that weren't weighed down by the old patterns. I wasn't the same person I had been. And the world didn't look the same either. I found myself stepping into spaces that once felt impossible. I said yes to things I would have avoided before, like going to a gathering with friends I hadn't seen in years, or taking a solo trip to a place I had always wanted to visit but never had the courage to explore. There was this freedom in simply existing. In showing up as I was, without the constant need to shrink, to hide, to apologize for taking up space. And it wasn't just about feeling free, it was about owning that freedom. One evening, a few weeks after that final meeting with my stepdad, I found myself sitting in the park, watching the sun set. There was a cool breeze in the air, and the sky was painted with hues of pink and orange. It felt like the world had finally slowed down long enough for me to breathe deeply, without the weight of everything I'd been carrying for so long. As I sat there, I realized that the healing wasn't linear. There were still moments when the past would surface, when the memories would creep in, uninvited, like shadows in the corners of my mind. But I didn't have to let them control me anymore. I could choose how to respond. I could choose to keep moving forward, even if it meant taking one small step at a time. And as I thought about how far I had come, from that moment in the living room, to standing up for myself, to facing the truth, to finally letting go of the fear, I felt a sense of pride I had never known. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. I was thriving. The calls from my stepdad eventually stopped. His attempts at manipulation became less frequent, and I didn't have to brace myself for the next phone call, the next attempt to turn things around in his favor. I knew that I had done everything I needed to do. I had stood my ground. I had shown up for myself in ways I never thought I could. And no matter what he did, that wouldn't change. But it wasn't just about him. It was about me. It was about the person I had become in the process. Stronger. Wiser. More compassionate. To myself and to others. The journey had taught me that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. It means accepting the scars, learning from them, and continuing to move forward, piece by piece, until the picture that emerges is one that you can finally recognize as your own. As I stood up and walked away from the park, I took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air fill my lungs. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't burdened by the past. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was walking toward a future I could truly own. The healing process doesn't happen overnight. It's messy, complicated, and often painful. But the moment you realize that you have the power to rewrite your story is the moment you start to reclaim your life. And that's a story worth telling. Keep going. The best is yet to come. The days blurred together in a quiet kind of peace. The urgency I once felt, the constant tension of living under someone else's control, had melted away, replaced with something I never thought I'd experience, a sense of calm. Not just any calm, though. A deep, almost sacred kind of peace that came from knowing I had finally reclaimed my life. I wasn't just free from the control, the manipulation, or the emotional abuse, I was free to become whoever I wanted to be. And that was the most powerful thing I had ever felt. Mom had come a long way, too. Every time we spoke, I could hear the change in her voice. She was still learning, still working through the aftermath of everything she had allowed to happen, but she was stronger. She was no longer the woman who had been afraid to speak up, afraid to stand up for herself or for me. She was beginning to find her voice again, and with each step, I could feel our bond growing stronger. She'd started making her own decisions, small ones at first. Choosing what to watch on TV, where to go for coffee, who to spend time with. And then, bigger ones. Like taking control of her finances, setting boundaries with people, and even talking to me about things she had never discussed before, like her own fears, her own regrets. For the first time in years, we were having real conversations, not just about what had happened to us, but about who we were becoming. And that, in itself, was healing. One evening, as I sat with her in her cozy kitchen, sipping tea, she looked at me, her face soft and full of emotion. "Ava, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done," she said, her voice thick with tears. "I don't know if I would have ever been able to see it if you hadn't fought for me, fought for us. But I want you to know that I'm going to keep fighting too. Not just for you, but for myself." Those words hit me harder than anything else had. I had fought so long for her to see me, to understand my pain, to see the truth. And now, here she was, finally seeing herself. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. But there was still something I hadn't fully dealt with, the fear of what might come next. I had learned to stand my ground, but I still carried the lingering anxiety of living under someone else's shadow for so long. The uncertainty of the future, the fear that maybe all this healing was just temporary. I didn't want to let that fear take hold of me again. I didn't want to feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own life. So, I decided to do something for myself. Something bold. Something that would show me that I was really free. I booked a solo trip. A week away, just for me, to a place I had always dreamed of visiting. No agenda, no expectations. Just time to explore, to breathe, to exist without the weight of my past holding me back. I didn't know what to expect from the trip, but I knew that it was something I had to do. Not for anyone else, not to prove anything to anyone. Just for me. When I arrived at the small coastal town, the salty air immediately calmed my nerves. The sea stretched out endlessly before me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly present in my life. I spent my days wandering the streets, meeting people, trying new foods, and exploring places I had only seen in photos before. The world felt so much bigger than the walls I had spent years building around myself. But it wasn't just the beauty of the place that changed me. It was the fact that I was alone. In the best possible way. I wasn't afraid to be by myself anymore. I wasn't looking for anyone's approval, validation, or permission. I was standing tall in my own life, owning every step I took. And that was something I had never imagined for myself. One evening, as I sat on the beach watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized how far I had come. I thought back to the girl who had once feared speaking up, the one who had felt invisible in her own life. I thought about the countless nights I had spent crying, wondering if I would ever be seen, if I would ever be enough. And now, here I was, alive, free, stronger than I had ever been. And I wasn't just enough. I was everything I had ever needed. When I returned from my trip, something had shifted inside me. I was no longer haunted by the fear of the past. I was living fully in the present, with a quiet confidence I had never known before. And it wasn't just because of the trip. It was because I had finally learned to live for myself. I had broken free from the chains that had once held me down, and in doing so, I had rediscovered my power. I wasn't the same person who had walked away from that Christmas dinner. I wasn't the person who had silently endured years of neglect and emotional abuse. I was someone new. Someone who had chosen to stand tall, to face the truth, and to never allow anyone to diminish her worth again. And that was the most empowering thing I could ever do. This story isn't just mine. It's a journey that so many of us take at different points in our lives, one of rediscovery, of healing, and of finally understanding that our worth is not defined by anyone else. It's a story of standing up for yourself, even when the world tells you to stay quiet. It's a story of choosing to live for you. And I hope that, no matter where you are in your own journey, you find the strength to reclaim your life. The best part of your story is just beginning. Keep going. The days blurred together in a quiet kind of peace. The urgency I once felt, the constant tension of living under someone else's control, had melted away, replaced with something I never thought I'd experience, a sense of calm. Not just any calm, though. A deep, almost sacred kind of peace that came from knowing I had finally reclaimed my life. I wasn't just free from the control, the manipulation, or the emotional abuse, I was free to become whoever I wanted to be. And that was the most powerful thing I had ever felt. Mom had come a long way, too. Every time we spoke, I could hear the change in her voice. She was still learning, still working through the aftermath of everything she had allowed to happen, but she was stronger. She was no longer the woman who had been afraid to speak up, afraid to stand up for herself or for me. She was beginning to find her voice again, and with each step, I could feel our bond growing stronger. She'd started making her own decisions, small ones at first. Choosing what to watch on TV, where to go for coffee, who to spend time with. And then, bigger ones. Like taking control of her finances, setting boundaries with people, and even talking to me about things she had never discussed before, like her own fears, her own regrets. For the first time in years, we were having real conversations, not just about what had happened to us, but about who we were becoming. And that, in itself, was healing. One evening, as I sat with her in her cozy kitchen, sipping tea, she looked at me, her face soft and full of emotion. "Ava, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done," she said, her voice thick with tears. "I don't know if I would have ever been able to see it if you hadn't fought for me, fought for us. But I want you to know that I'm going to keep fighting too. Not just for you, but for myself." Those words hit me harder than anything else had. I had fought so long for her to see me, to understand my pain, to see the truth. And now, here she was, finally seeing herself. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. But there was still something I hadn't fully dealt with, the fear of what might come next. I had learned to stand my ground, but I still carried the lingering anxiety of living under someone else's shadow for so long. The uncertainty of the future, the fear that maybe all this healing was just temporary. I didn't want to let that fear take hold of me again. I didn't want to feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own life. So, I decided to do something for myself. Something bold. Something that would show me that I was really free. I booked a solo trip. A week away, just for me, to a place I had always dreamed of visiting. No agenda, no expectations. Just time to explore, to breathe, to exist without the weight of my past holding me back. I didn't know what to expect from the trip, but I knew that it was something I had to do. Not for anyone else, not to prove anything to anyone. Just for me. When I arrived at the small coastal town, the salty air immediately calmed my nerves. The sea stretched out endlessly before me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly present in my life. I spent my days wandering the streets, meeting people, trying new foods, and exploring places I had only seen in photos before. The world felt so much bigger than the walls I had spent years building around myself. But it wasn't just the beauty of the place that changed me. It was the fact that I was alone. In the best possible way. I wasn't afraid to be by myself anymore. I wasn't looking for anyone's approval, validation, or permission. I was standing tall in my own life, owning every step I took. And that was something I had never imagined for myself. One evening, as I sat on the beach watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized how far I had come. I thought back to the girl who had once feared speaking up, the one who had felt invisible in her own life. I thought about the countless nights I had spent crying, wondering if I would ever be seen, if I would ever be enough. And now, here I was, alive, free, stronger than I had ever been. And I wasn't just enough. I was everything I had ever needed. When I returned from my trip, something had shifted inside me. I was no longer haunted by the fear of the past. I was living fully in the present, with a quiet confidence I had never known before. And it wasn't just because of the trip. It was because I had finally learned to live for myself. I had broken free from the chains that had once held me down, and in doing so, I had rediscovered my power. I wasn't the same person who had walked away from that Christmas dinner. I wasn't the person who had silently endured years of neglect and emotional abuse. I was someone new. Someone who had chosen to stand tall, to face the truth, and to never allow anyone to diminish her worth again. And that was the most empowering thing I could ever do. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. This story isn't just mine. It's a journey that so many of us take at different points in our lives, one of rediscovery, of healing, and of finally understanding that our worth is not defined by anyone else. It's a story of standing up for yourself, even when the world tells you to stay quiet. It's a story of choosing to live for you. And I hope that, no matter where you are in your own journey, you find the strength to reclaim your life. The best part of your story is just beginning. As the months passed, I continued to embrace the changes that had become a part of my life. Every day felt like a new opportunity to grow, to learn, to be exactly who I was meant to be without the weight of fear or self-doubt pulling me down. But something I hadn't fully realized until recently was just how powerful the act of letting go could be. For so long, I had carried the burden of my past, resentment, anger, disappointment, and thought that I had to keep holding on to those emotions in order to protect myself. I thought that if I let go, I might lose the fight I had fought so hard to win. But the truth was, letting go wasn't about giving up. It was about freedom. I began to let go of the things that were still holding me back, the anger I had toward my stepdad, the lingering sadness that came from years of neglect, the guilt that I hadn't done more sooner. It wasn't easy. It wasn't instantaneous. It was a slow, deliberate process, but over time, I began to feel lighter. I had spent so many years clinging to the belief that I needed to hold on to the hurt in order to protect myself, but the truth was, the hurt wasn't protecting me. It was holding me hostage. Letting go didn't mean I was forgetting what happened. It didn't mean I was forgiving the people who had wronged me. It meant that I was choosing to no longer let those things define me. I was deciding, once and for all, that I wasn't going to let my past control my future. I was no longer the victim of my circumstances. I was the author of my own story. And I had the power to decide what that story would be. I started small. Each day, I would make a conscious effort to let go of a piece of that weight. I would breathe deeply, close my eyes, and let the anger, the sadness, the resentment, just melt away. Not because it didn't matter, but because I knew that holding on to it wasn't serving me. Slowly, the bitterness began to fade, replaced by a sense of calm, of understanding that I could walk through life unburdened by the past. And with that came an even greater realization. The power of letting go wasn't just about freeing myself from old emotions, it was about allowing new ones to take their place. When you clear out the space that was once occupied by all that hurt, you create room for something else. Something brighter. Something better. I found joy in the small moments again. Laughing at a silly joke, enjoying the warmth of the sun on my face, taking time to do things just for me, without guilt or hesitation. I didn't feel like I had to earn those moments anymore. I didn't need to justify my happiness. I had every right to embrace it, to let it fill me up, without looking over my shoulder, wondering if I was allowed to feel this way. The more I let go, the more I began to embrace my own worth. I started to set clearer boundaries with people. I said no when I needed to, without apologizing. I prioritized my own well-being, even when it meant disappointing others. I stopped measuring my worth based on how much I could give, how much I could endure. Instead, I started measuring it based on how much I loved myself, how much I respected myself, and how much I was willing to let go of the things that didn't serve me. And in doing so, I began to heal in ways I hadn't expected. Not just emotionally, but physically and mentally. My energy shifted. I felt lighter, more focused. The chronic tension in my shoulders faded. I started sleeping better, my mind no longer constantly replaying old memories or worrying about what might happen next. I was finally able to just be, without the constant weight of fear or anxiety. Mom and I continued to build on our newfound bond, and I could see her letting go of her own fears as well. She was learning to let go of the guilt that had kept her stuck for so long. She was learning to forgive herself, to give herself permission to take up space, to make her own choices without feeling guilty. And as she healed, I could see the joy returning to her eyes. I knew she was finding her way, just as I was finding mine. Then one day, after weeks of letting go, I realized that I had fully forgiven myself. For everything. For the mistakes I made, for the times I had allowed myself to be silenced, for the years I spent believing I wasn't enough. I realized that I had done the best I could with what I knew at the time, and that I had survived. And surviving was enough. The day I realized that was the day I truly felt free. I wasn't carrying any more guilt. I wasn't holding on to any old pain. I wasn't looking back anymore. I had walked through the fire, and I had emerged stronger. Now, I could look at my life with clarity, with peace, and with a deep sense of gratitude for everything I had been through, because it had brought me to this moment. A moment where I was finally living fully, unapologetically, and without fear. The power of letting go is a gift we give to ourselves. It's the act of freeing our hearts, minds, and spirits from the weight of the past so we can make room for a future filled with possibility. It's a reminder that we don't have to carry the burdens of others or our own mistakes forever. Sometimes, the best thing we can do is to release what no longer serves us and step into the life we've always deserved. Keep going, because the best is yet to come. It's funny how life can surprise you. You think you've reached the end of your journey, that you've finally closed the chapters that were full of hurt and confusion, only to realize that there's still so much more waiting for you. The past few months had been filled with healing and reclaiming my life, but as time went on, I began to notice something I hadn't expected. I was beginning to dream again. Not in the way I used to, clutching at small hopes out of desperation, afraid that if I reached too far, I would fall. No, now I was dreaming because I believed in those dreams. Because I knew I was capable of making them happen. It wasn't just the simple act of healing or growing stronger. It was something deeper, a quiet, steady confidence that I could shape my future on my own terms. The pieces were finally falling into place, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was living the life I had always imagined, even if it looked a little different than what I had originally planned. The first major shift came when I made a decision that felt right, but also incredibly terrifying. I chose to go back to school. It wasn't something I had expected to do, let alone feel ready for, but something inside me clicked. I realized that I had spent so long putting my dreams aside for others, that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to pursue something for me. Not for approval. Not because someone told me it was the right thing to do. But because I truly wanted to. I remember sitting in the student lounge of the college campus, the bustling noise of students around me, and feeling the strangest sense of peace. I had just attended my first class, a creative writing course, something that had always been a passion of mine but had been buried under years of feeling like I wasn't allowed to dream. I had spent so many years living according to someone else's rules, but now, this was mine. This was my space, my moment, my chance to build a future. I didn't know where this new path would lead, but I knew it was mine to walk. The fear that once held me back, the voice that told me I wasn't good enough, was quieter now. In its place was a quiet strength, a voice that said, "You've come this far. You've fought too hard to turn back now." In the months that followed, things continued to shift. I found myself opening up more to new experiences, new people. I made friends who didn't know my past, who didn't see me as the quiet girl hiding from the world. They saw me for who I was, strong, determined, and capable. It was a strange feeling, to be seen in this new light, but it was also freeing. I no longer had to explain myself, or justify my worth. It was enough simply to be. And then there was love. It wasn't something I expected, not after everything I had been through. I wasn't looking for it, and to be honest, I wasn't sure I even believed in it the way I once had. But love, as it turns out, doesn't always come when you plan it. It doesn't announce itself or make grand gestures. Sometimes, it just quietly slips in when you're ready, when you've done the hard work of loving yourself first. I met someone in one of my classes. He was kind, patient, and had a way of seeing me, truly seeing me, that made me feel like I was worth more than the sum of my past mistakes. We started talking, slowly at first, then more comfortably. I was nervous, unsure if I was ready to open my heart again. But there was something different about him, something steady. And as time passed, I realized that love wasn't about perfect timing or grand gestures. It was about being vulnerable, trusting again, and choosing to let someone in when you've learned to love yourself first. The relationship didn't fix everything. It wasn't a magical solution that made all the pain go away. But it showed me that love, real love, isn't about escaping your past. It's about walking forward, hand in hand with someone who accepts you as you are. It's about sharing the space you fought so hard to create, not because you need someone to complete you, but because you've learned that two whole people can create something beautiful together. As I looked back on everything I had gone through, I realized something: the hardest part wasn't just surviving. It was learning to thrive. To step into the light of my own life and say, "This is mine. I've earned it." I think sometimes we expect healing to be a neat, tidy process. We expect that one day we'll wake up and suddenly, all the pieces will fall into place. But the truth is, healing is messy. It's a journey that doesn't have a clear end. You don't just arrive at a place and say, "I'm done." You keep growing, you keep changing, and most importantly, you keep choosing yourself. And that's what I had finally learned. I had learned to choose myself. I had learned to forgive, to heal, and to move forward. And in doing so, I had created a new life. A life that was mine to shape. A life full of possibility. A life I was proud to live. This isn't the end of my story. It's just another chapter. The journey is still unfolding, and I'm still learning, still growing. But if there's one thing I know for sure, it's this: we are never defined by our past. We are defined by what we choose to do with it. And if you're ready to take that step, I promise you that the life you're meant to live is waiting for you. Keep moving forward. The best is yet to come. I often find myself reflecting on how far I've come, and it's almost hard to believe sometimes. There was a time when I couldn't see past the weight of my past, when I thought that my life would always be defined by the hurt, the manipulation, and the fear I had lived with for so long. But now, as I stand here today, I realize that I've rewritten my story in a way I never thought possible. The journey to this point hasn't been easy, and it certainly hasn't been linear. There have been moments of doubt, of wondering if I was strong enough to keep going. But every time I faced those moments, I reminded myself of something simple: I had to keep moving forward. Because that's the only way we ever truly grow. And now, as I look ahead, I know that I'm not the same person I was when I started this journey. I've shed the weight of the past, I've healed, and I've learned that living for myself isn't a selfish act, it's an essential one. It's not just about surviving. It's about thriving. It's about embracing everything that makes me who I am and not apologizing for it. The things I used to worry about no longer have the power to control me. I don't worry about what others think of me, or whether I'm doing things right in their eyes. I've learned that the only approval I need is my own. I've come to understand that when you start living for yourself, you give others permission to do the same. And that's powerful. That's how change happens, one person, one decision, at a time. I still don't know what the future holds. There are days when I wonder what will happen next, whether I'll face new challenges, whether I'll meet new people who will change my life again. But the difference now is that I face those uncertainties with confidence. Because I know that whatever happens, I can handle it. I can stand tall in the face of anything that comes my way, because I've already survived the worst of it. The past is behind me, but it's not something I'll ever forget. It's shaped me into who I am today, and for that, I'm grateful. But it no longer has the power to define me. The power to define who I am, what I want, and where I'm going is mine and mine alone. And that's something I never thought I'd say. But I've learned to trust in myself, in my ability to navigate whatever life throws my way. I've learned to embrace the unknown with open arms, knowing that I have everything I need within me to succeed. I've started taking risks in ways I never thought I could. I've launched projects, started conversations, and said yes to opportunities one would have previously turned down. For the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm waiting for permission. I feel like I'm actively creating the life I want to live, and it's both exhilarating and terrifying in the best possible way. But more than anything, I've learned that healing isn't a destination. It's a journey. And it's one that I will continue to walk, one step at a time, every single day. I've learned that it's okay to not have everything figured out. It's okay to not have all the answers. What matters is that I'm showing up for myself, every single day, doing the best I can. The best part of my journey isn't just about how far I've come, it's about how much I've learned to embrace who I am. To truly love myself, flaws and all. To honor my past, but not let it hold me back. To trust in the process of healing, even when it's hard. And to know that, no matter what comes next, I'm ready. And now, as I step into this new chapter, I'm not afraid anymore. Because I know that whatever life throws my way, I will face it with the same strength, courage, and resilience that I've found along the way. So, here's to the future, the unknown, the exciting, the terrifying, and the beautiful. It's mine to write, and I'm ready to make it count. This is only the beginning. The future is waiting, and I know that with every step I take, I'm building a life that's truly mine. And the best part? You can do the same. Your story isn't over yet. The next chapter is waiting for you. Keep moving forward. You've got this. As I continue on this journey, I've learned that life is never as predictable as we might want it to be. There are days when I still catch myself wondering, what's next? What's the next challenge? What's the next step in this unpredictable, messy, beautiful journey I'm on? But instead of feeling afraid of that uncertainty, I've started to embrace it. Because I've learned that the unknown isn't something to fear, it's something to be excited about. The past few years have been a whirlwind of transformation, and each day has shown me more and more that change is constant. I'm not the person I was 6 months ago, or even 6 weeks ago. I'm constantly evolving, learning, and pushing myself further than I ever thought possible. But it isn't just about personal growth, it's about expansion. Expanding my heart, expanding my mind, and expanding the possibilities of what I'm capable of. And that brings me to something I've learned: I am no longer afraid of failure. In the past, the idea of failing would paralyze me. I'd second-guess myself, worry about every step, and avoid doing anything that felt too risky or uncertain. But now, I see failure as a stepping stone, not a setback. It's a lesson, an opportunity to grow, and an important part of moving forward. That's why I've started saying yes to the things that once terrified me. When an opportunity comes my way, instead of shrinking back or doubting myself, I step up to the challenge. I've learned to trust in my ability to figure things out as I go, and to trust that I will be okay, no matter what happens. I've also learned to embrace discomfort. The idea of doing things outside of my comfort zone used to make me want to run in the other direction. But I've come to realize that it's in those uncomfortable moments that I grow the most. The moments when I'm stretched beyond my limits are the moments when I discover just how strong I truly am. There are days when the fear still tries to creep in. When I wonder if I'm truly capable of everything I'm dreaming of. But instead of letting that fear stop me, I acknowledge it, I sit with it for a moment, and then I move forward anyway. I've learned that fear doesn't have to be the enemy. It can be a companion, a reminder that I'm doing something important. One of the biggest risks I've taken recently is opening myself up to new relationships. Not just romantic ones, but friendships, too. For so long, I kept myself isolated. I built walls to protect myself, thinking that if I kept my distance, I would be safe. But now, I know that true connection, true intimacy, can only happen when we open ourselves up and allow others in. I've started making deeper connections with people who inspire me, people who challenge me, and people who simply want to see me succeed. These friendships are different from the ones I had before. They're built on mutual respect, trust, and the understanding that we all have our own struggles, but we can walk through them together. And that has made all the difference. Romantically, I've allowed myself to be vulnerable in ways I never thought possible. I'm not afraid of showing up as my authentic self, flaws and all. I've learned that being loved isn't about perfection, it's about being real. And the more real I am, the more I attract people who appreciate me for exactly who I am. But the most important lesson in all of this has been that it's okay to not have all the answers. In the past, I felt like I had to have everything figured out before I could move forward. I believed that I had to have a concrete plan, a checklist, and a guarantee that everything would work out before I took the first step. But what I've realized now is that sometimes, the best way to move forward is to take the first step without all the answers. It's about trusting that the path will reveal itself as you go. The future is still full of unknowns, and I'm learning to lean into that uncertainty with open arms. I've stopped trying to control every aspect of my life, and instead, I've started embracing the messiness and the magic of it all. Life isn't something to be controlled, it's something to be experienced. And I'm ready to experience it all. There will still be challenges, of course. There will still be moments of doubt, moments of fear, moments when I wonder if I'm doing it right. But instead of letting those moments stop me, I've learned to push through them, to learn from them, and to trust that I'm on the right path. I've come to realize that this journey isn't just about healing from my past, it's about creating the life I want. It's about being unapologetic in my pursuit of joy, success, and peace. It's about living authentically and embracing all that I am, knowing that I am worthy of everything life has to offer. So as I look toward the future, I'm not afraid. I'm not waiting for permission. I'm not holding myself back anymore. I'm walking forward, with my head held high, knowing that whatever comes next, I'm ready for it. Because I've already overcome so much, and I know that nothing can stop me now. The future is full of limitless possibilities, and I'm stepping into it with an open heart. If I've learned anything, it's that we are all capable of far more than we think. It's time to stop holding back, to stop waiting for things to fall into place, and to start creating the life we truly deserve. Keep going. The best is yet to come. As I stand at the edge of this new chapter in my life, I realize that the journey is never truly over. The truth is, healing, growth, and transformation are ongoing processes. They don't happen overnight, and they don't come with a neat, tidy conclusion. They happen in the small moments, when you choose to take that first step, when you decide to stand tall, when you decide that enough is enough. I've come a long way since the days when I felt trapped in my own life. There were times when I thought I wouldn't make it out of the darkness, but I did. And I didn't just survive, I thrived. Every setback, every painful moment, every challenge became a building block for the person I am today. I no longer look back with regret or shame. Instead, I look back with gratitude because it's through all of it that I found my true self. The future is full of possibilities, and I'm stepping into it not as the person I used to be, but as the person I've always been meant to become. I'm no longer waiting for permission or trying to fit into someone else's mold. I'm creating my own path, and I'm doing it with confidence, courage, and love for myself that I never knew was possible. I'm finally free. Free to live my life on my own terms, to pursue my dreams, to make mistakes, and to rise again. And most importantly, I've learned that I'm worthy of all of it. If this story resonates with you, if you've walked a similar path or found yourself in a place of healing, I want you to know one thing: you are not alone. No matter what you've gone through, you have the strength inside you to move forward. Your story is not defined by your past. It's defined by the choices you make today and the future you create. The most beautiful part of this journey is that it's yours to write. And no matter where you are in your life right now, know that you have everything you need within you to step into the future you deserve. So take a deep breath, take that first step, and know that the best is still ahead. Because this, my friend, is just the beginning. The journey is ongoing, and I'll be right here with you, sharing more stories and supporting each other as we continue to grow. Let's keep moving forward together. The future is ours to create.